And hello there, and welcome to the final part in this three-part series about the Operations Odyssey. And this one will be covering my character and why he is spec'd the way he is. And additionally, there'll be a little footnote in this, mainly just to start with. Since I made the previous two videos, I decided to slightly change my character around a little bit in the equipment on the Operations Odyssey. Nothing major, but I just thought I'd show you what's changed. Nothing too major, but I did a bit of a respec in power settings within the skill tree and changed my console over. I've dropped my RCS console to put in a purple Mark 12 ejector assembly to give me a bit more oomph to my engine power. With my little tweak of build, I'm currently now running at 100 power. It gives me weapons at 123, and it also now gives me by default 61 on shields, 61 on engines, and now 61 on auxiliary, which I can't really complain about. It's pretty much given me a decent bit of power all the way around, and I know I could enhance that with duty officers as well, but this is my default, so I'm quite happy with those values. So just a little footnote there that I've changed my equipment a little bit. I may occasionally swap in the RCS console again, but I'm learning to just go without it really. It's cruiser, so I'm going to spend most of my time circling a target. Okay, let's get back to matters in hand with this character and discuss the skill tree and why I picked what I picked. I'll give you a very quick little overview. You can just have a look and pause slowly. So these videos have not been this is how to build it. This guide is literally just why I use it, what I use it for, what I picked. So it's on my choice at the moment. So without further ado, we'll start with the tactical department, or the tactical system skill tree, and we'll run through from lieutenant all the way up to admiral. Now I realise this is an engineering toon, but on this toon I do use attack patterns. I use attack pattern Omega and attack pattern Beta, and I decided to enhance those abilities. I put 3 skill points into that, which you can have a look here if I just bring them up briefly. Something to notice with the season changes and the revamp to the skill tree, spending 3 points itself actually gets you a pretty decent amount of abilities into that skill. I think the rule of thumb is these days, if you want it, you can go for 3. If you really want it, you go to 6. And yeah, basically, if you want to be the absolute best in that skill, you put the full 9 points in there. But to be honest, that can be a waste, and you could use those skills somewhere else. And there's lots of consoles and other things out there that you can do to boost your skill trees up as well. But you'll see that if I wanted it, it will be 3. If I really wanted it, it'll be 6. And if I really, really, really need to be into that skill, you will see 9 points and things. So just to give you a quick recap there. Okay, Starship weapon training. Now, obviously as an engineer and in a cruiser, I'm not going to be doing spike heavy DPS damage. My damage is going to be damage over time. So I pummel a target rather than just obliterate it. But either way, I'm still going to want to do some decent damage, and the 6 points in weapon training is just really, that is the way to go, I think, if you really want to do damage. In your early lieutenant tree, I'd certainly stick 6 in there. Back in the original days, when STO first came online, in those days it wasn't always best to overspend in the lieutenant skill tree, but times have changed now with the new skill sets and how they work, so you really want to spend wisely. I don't necessarily spend wisely in this build, but I spend in what works for me, so hopefully this will help you out as well. Now in the Lieutenant Commander, Starship energy weapons and projectile weapons. So basically this improves your energy weapon damage and beams and cannons, and then projectiles obviously does your projectiles such as mines and torpedoes. Again, 6 points in these. I originally, in my previous build, you may notice I only had 3 points in here, but sometimes I was finding it was a little bit lacking, especially when I was using high yield torpedoes. So when I swapped everything around a little bit, I've now got the 6 points in projectile weapons. That has made quite a bit of difference as well. My Harpang torpedo that I used forward is now giving me 4,451 kinetic damage, which is nothing to really sneeze at. And the quantum torpedo that I use forward is now going to be 4,639 kinetic damage. Now again, you can improve these with consoles too, but because this is a cruiser and an Operations Odyssey, I only have 2 tactical slots. My 2 tactical slots are basically set to enhance my beam arrays, so they're anti-proton mag regulators, so I'm basically getting the most out of my beam arrays. If I was a TAC officer, and I may have 3 or 4, well, more likely 4 tactical slots, then what I would probably do is slot 3 tactical slots. Say if I use an anti-proton on quantum torpedoes, I'd slot 3 tactical consoles for anti-proton damage, so the mag regulators for anti-proton, and then the fourth one may actually be a torpedo console to increase my quantum torpedo damage as well. And there are other ways to increase that as well, such as the Klingon Honor Guard set. For example, if you use 2-part that, you get a bonus to your projectile weapon damage as well. Something I may consider covering actually in a later future video. I think I may do the KDF side as my next video. I haven't decided yet. Anyway, I digress. Now moving on to the commander skill set in tactical. Maneuvers and targeting. Starship maneuvers is basically your defense value, so the higher the defense, the harder you are to hit. Now this is countered by accuracy, so if you've got someone who's got 9 points, say, in targeting and has got ×2 and upwards accuracy, so they might have ×2 or ×3, then this is going to be negated somewhat, but you can still increase your defense values. Little tidbit there, you might want to maybe slot the AJS set if you want real serious pure defense. The AJS set gives 2 of the items and the set bonuses actually give you a +5 defense. Nothing to sneeze at, especially if you've got the tactical captain who's using all his buffs. It's going to hurt, and believe you me, despite you being in the cruiser, I have been one-shotted, and there's a couple of YouTube channels out there that can actually show you some of the KDF side when they basically tractor beam you, beam overload 3, and high yield, and believe you me, you will crumble. I've yet to counter that one, although I have been seeing it as a personal challenge to do, but I haven't come up with an idea yet, but I'm working on it. Now targeting, as I said a few moments ago, this basically improves your accuracy. And in this game, I tend to favour accuracy and critical hits. Critical severity, sorry. So on my anti-proton arrays there, you see I've got +20 critical severity and I've got a +10 accuracy. In my Science Odyssey, and there are times that I very much miss my ×2 accuracy Tetron arrays, beam arrays. They didn't do as much damage as some of the arrays out there, but blimey, did they actually hit their target more and more and more, so I missed those. But as and when, I'll see if I can get some anti-proton arrays with better accuracy, but I'm not sure if there are actually any out there, to be honest. I've only ever seen the time +10 accuracy, but either way, it still does its job. Another way to enhance accuracy actually would be the Omega space set, so not the Mako, but the Omega one. The deflector array gives you a bonus let me think, it was to targeting, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly. So that's another way to increase your target as well. So, for example, in escorts, might want to use the Omega for hit and run, and science ships, for example, maybe not necessarily the Wells, maybe the Wells actually, or the long-range reconnaissance, or any of the science cruisers. I've always seen them as very light cruisers, like the Intrepids. And you might find the Omega space set actually quite beneficial there because you're getting an accuracy bonus, and if you're using subsystem targeting as well, then your hits are going to hit on target more often, and if you, instead of using subsystem targeting, you're going to take out systems a bit more easily as well. So something to bear in mind. Starship Stealth, I don't bother in at the Captain skill tree set. I don't use it. Threat Control, one of those ones that I really ought to have a bit more in here, but I'm going to invest, I think, in some of the Romulan consoles as and when our embassy gets everything in our fleet. And ideally, I probably ought to throw this up to 6, but I've got 3 at the moment. As I said, I'm a casual player, so I don't mind how holding aggro, and I use other methods to get aggro as well, just as beam fire at will. But, excuse me, threat control again. Basically, you want to get the attention off of the escorts and onto your good self. So basically, if you're in an STF, you're going to want the cubes and the spheres, etc., to really be pummeling you because you're the one with the highest hit points. You can take it more. Not necessarily be a shield tank. That's kind of become purview of the science ships these days. They seem to be shield tanks more, but cruisers tend to be more the whole tankers, at least in my humble opinion. I'm happy to be corrected, but that's at least in my experience of playing. Now, in the Admiral skill set tree under Tactical, you've got the Starship Energy Weapon Specialization and the Projectile Weapon Specialization. In a nutshell, the more points you get in here, this will improve your critical hit and severities with any time you hit a target with your weapon. So, the more points in here, the more crits you're going to get. Primarily, a cruiser is beam arrays, so obviously I've gone for beam weapons. If, for example, you might be a bird of prey, one of the Borels that I seem to see the tricobalt torpedo boats, then you may actually have more points in the projectile weapons. It's horses for courses, really, whatever works for you. My tactical KDF Klingon, she actually uses 6 points in energy weapon specialization and projectile, so she does some very mean damage. Especially since she uses the temporal warfare suite, so she uses anti-proton and chronoton torpedoes, and there are bonuses with the temporal warfare suite. So chronoton torpedoes aren't quite as much as a joke as they used to be. So when I do hit with a chronoton, I want to do some damage. But it's the same with this ship and this cruiser. You're going to want to do decent crits. Unfortunately, with my skill set, something had to give here, so I decided that my beam arrays are my primary weapons and my torpedoes are my secondary weapons. So I only put the 3 points into projectile weapon specialization, but I've got the full 6 in energy to do the most damage. Now, moving on to the engineering systems, and we'll go for the lieutenant skill tree first. Driver card is currently 6 points. I tend to use my cruisers mostly my engineer because he is a full spec craft, although craft is not much in Star Trek Online at the moment, but we are promised it will improve. I will hold my breath and wait and see what happens. But as such, I do a lot, and to be perfectly honest, the only reason I've got driver con in here is when I'm in set to space and I'm doing particle trace collections. I tend to find it's rather cutthroat out there these days, and there's a lot of greed out there, and it's not uncommon for someone to, I could be, 10k, 20k out from a particle trace, and then suddenly I'll have someone overshoot me with quantum slipstream and nab that particle trace. So, as such, when I'm at a dead stop and I'm turning to the next particle trace, I find 6 points, and this is actually very useful. It just means I turn quicker, and you also get a bonus to slipstream and your transwarp engines, for example. The Mako ones with the asynchronous warp field gives me a bonus to this. So basically, I travel faster in set to space, and I turn quicker in set to space as well. Again, it's quite useful if you do the event where you race around the universe to get the energy credits. Again, that's quite useful to have the 6 in there. But my other tunes, I will be perfectly honest, don't have it. It's just this particular engineering build that uses it, and I've got the full 6 in there. So it's just for this particular build. You don't have to have anything in there, really, to be honest. By the time you get up to Vice Admiral 15, you've got or even Rear Admiral lower, and you start to get access to the Borg engines, etc., via the reputation system. Although it's a little bit more of a grind now until we get there. But a lot of the fleet engines, sorry if I get the words out, in the in your fleets, if you've got your tiers up and you can get access to their engines, you can actually get access to engines that actually have the asynchronous warp field bubble as well. So you don't have to go for the grind of the reputation system straight away. You could get the ones from your fleet shop, but obviously you've got to contribute to your fleets. You've got to build your fleet credit up and have the dilithium available. So it's kind of a grind, and it kind of isn't. And Star Trek Online currently has become, I think it's fair to say, somewhat more of a grind than it used to be. So you do have to work for these things. And to be fair, I don't mind an element of grinding for things, but it does seem a little bit more than it does in other games I've played over the years. But I'm a big Trekkie fan, so I'm still here. So I'm still doing the best I can. Now, moving on to the Lieutenant. Starship batteries is one of those ones you can take or leave. But to be honest, if you're an escort, for example, most chances are you're not going to have much in Starship Auxiliary, and Auxiliary does have an effect such as hazard emitters, transfer shield strength, and as such, I favour auxiliary power in all my builds as best as possible, and I do use batteries. I tend with this particular build now not to have to worry about using energy batteries as much, except for the enhanced plasma manifold and the EPS transfer. Um, but batteries are still there, and if you need them, you use them. And the more points you got in here, the longer the batteries are going to last. So especially important maybe in an escort. You might actually want to throw the 6 points in this, so don't worry about driver con and throw 6 points in Starship batteries. And then take advantage of all your batteries, use them more, especially in the Borg STFs where you get the large size batteries now, so you get even more oomph and bang for buck out of them. Or even those enough that are lucky enough to have the red matter capacitors, for example, then obviously more points in Starship batteries, the better the bonus you're going to get out of them. Starship hull repair is one of those self-explanatory ones, really. Basically, the more points in here improves your repair and healing abilities. Even if you don't go into other things in any great detail, at least in Lieutenantry, I think it would be advisable to have a decent number in there to repair your hull, basically. And as an engineer and even a science officer, hazard emitters is influenced heavily with Starship hull repair. Engineering team, obviously, auxiliary structure or miracle worker, for example. So I've got the full 6 points in here. Now moving on to Lieutenant Commander, my structure integrity basically improves your ship's hull strength. Basically, it's your hit points. And as such, I've got 6 in here. For those of you flying escorts, again, you're going to probably want to put 6 in this cruiser. I've definitely got 6. I could have thrown in here 9 if I really wanted to, and then take advantage of the Mako set or even the Borg set that increases your hull as well, the structure integrity. But to be honest, I think 6 is more than enough, and it means I can spend the other 3 skill points somewhere else as well. But if you're a real dedicated tank and you're really into your STFs and you're doing into the hive, for example, then you're probably going to want to have even more in structure integrity. But I find 6 is more than enough. There are other consoles and bits you can do to increase that as well. Subsystem repair is one of those mysterious ones that not everyone believes in anymore, and I have to admit, in the current game mechanics, subsystem repair doesn't seem to be as important at the moment. It does seem to be a bit of a dark art. However, in recent patches, I've noticed that polarized the hull, for example, seems to have less an effect than it used to against tracked beam immunities, and I tend to find NPC ships and toons are basically doing more subsystem damage than I expected, even though I may have a decent amount of points in power isolators and dampeners. So I find my systems are going off and back online more than they were a couple of patches ago. And what I decided was I've kept the 3 points in subsystem repair. Again, some people may negate that and say, no, don't bother, use engineering team. It's your choice really at the end of the day, but I was giving myself some breathing room. I tend to save engineering team for healing other teammates, and I use auxiliary structure integrity more and hazard emitters more, so I decided to put the 3 points in here, and I have noticed a bit of a difference. Now I don't know if that's a game mechanic bug or something they're working on for Season 8, I don't know, but it's just my observations at the moment. Subsystem repair does seem to be becoming a bit more important, and the NPCs are certainly taken out. Well, they certainly seem more buffed than usual, and they do seem to be taken out by subsystems, as I said, with more frequency. And last but not least, in Lieutenant Commander, we've got the Starship Warp Core efficiency. This basically improves all your ship's power levels, so weapon shields, engine, ancillary. So basically, the lower you have a power setting, the more of a bonus you're going to get into that subsystem, and that counts up until if and when you put the power settings over 75. So, for example, here on my weapon systems here, I'm set to 100, which is way over 75, so I'm not getting any bonus to my weapon power. However, at 35, I'm getting a bonus to my shields, engines, and auxiliary, and as such, that's how I'm maintaining everything at 61, 61, and 61, and then 123 here. So quite useful that. Again, you're probably going to want at least 6 in that at the very least. Different builds will be slightly different. Science ships, for example, my science toon, she does actually have 6 in this, mainly because I have my weapon power set on a much lower setting, because I'm using my auxiliary and my science systems as more offensive than my actual weapon systems. So I'll take whatever bonus I can get into that. Something you might consider, just digress momentarily, for science ships, the Dominion space set that you can get from the Dominion featured episode series is actually not too bad. There's actually a bonus there to weapon systems if you have it set on a lower setting, so it's something to bear in mind. And obviously there are other sets out. The Klingon on the Guard, for example, gives you bonuses to other power settings as well, and there's Doth's Root as well, which that'll be a separate video I think later on down the line. Now moving on to the commander's skill set in engineering the electroplasma systems. Basically this improves the rate at which power transfers from one system to another, and as such, because I'm using emergency power to shields, I'm using the plasma manifold, EPS transfer, I want that power, the moment I activate that power, to go into the main systems as quickly as possible. So I use the full 6 in here. Something also to note that Nadion inversion, that's a power resistance drain. The more points you've got on EPS, this actually affects it. So at the moment I'm getting 199.2 resistance to that power drain system. So something to bear in mind. Impulse thrusters, another good one, this one, especially if you're a cruiser or even an escort. If you want to turn your escort, for example, and keep those 4 cannons on a target, if you're using all cannon builds, then you're going to want as much skill points in here as possible. And so basically, yeah, the more points you got in here, the better your ship's going to turn at impulse speeds, even at full impulse. So on my occasion I've used 6 in here. Some of my other attacks run 9. That's one of the only occasions I run 9 actually, so I can have the maximum amount of turn rate. Again, this is something you might want to throw a full 9 into if you're running an Odyssey class, if you want to get the absolute best out of your turn rate. Again, there's only so much you can do to turn the Odyssey, so you're going to have to use other tricks of the trade, to get there, but I find 6 is working just about right for me. Again, I dropped my RCS console in this particular Odyssey, so I'm still turning okay with evasive maneuvers, tap out Omega, and emergency 2 dampeners, so I can't complain. Warp core potential is basically a flat bonus to all your systems. This is one of those ones that you might, if you're running a ship where power levels are quite critical, for escorts, for example, and you want to squeeze absolutely everything out of your shield system, say for example, to bring up as much of your shields up as quickly as possible when they recharge, then you might actually want to put the full 9 points into warp core potential. A couple of my attack officers actually do run 9 in this, just to give me that flat bonus, to give me as much power as I can get. So something to bear in mind there. 6 for me on the cruisers, fine. There are other ways to increase your power levels as well, as I think DOS, etc. But I went for the 6 points in this one. Now, engine performance. I will be perfectly honest, I fly cruisers. This is the greater the bonus into your engine power, basically. So you get a fat bonus to engine power. So this is another area where you're getting, excuse me, a bonus to power levels. If you're running, say, in this particular build it's a bit different, but say in my Science Odyssey, for example, I would be running high power in auxiliary and high power in weapons, and I would be having my shields and engines on a slightly lower setting. If you're using resilient shield arrays, such as the Mako set, they regenerate much quicker, and you can basically increase the shield regeneration rate, especially with the reputation system, which I'll go into later. So you might find that you have your weapons and science at pretty high levels, and then you'll find in the middle, in shields and engines, will be somewhat lower. So to get a flat bonus out of that, you want to make sure you've got some points in engine performance. Now what I would suggest you do is, obviously in the shield system and the engine have the same values, so that, say for example, you've got engine and auxiliary at a high level, you're going to have shields and engines low. Ideally you want the figures roughly the same, so you get the rough same sort of power levels. Otherwise you get a slight imbalance in power, it's not for everyone. I guess it's just that retentiveness in me that I like to try and keep my power levels almost at the same level. But again, if engine performance, especially if you're going to be running low power settings to your engines, and sometimes in cruisers you'll run lower power to your engines so that you can run high power to your shields and to your weapons, for example, then obviously the more points you got in here, the better. Hull plating basically is your resistance to energy weapon damage, so beams and cannons. The less points you have in this, the more damage you're going to take, or the less resistance you've got to those formats of damage that will be incoming. So again, you're probably going to want to have this fairly high, 6 points ideally in the cruiser, and you may balance that out. You might reduce it a little bit in your science ships and rely more on hazard emitters, for example, to keep your resistance up and polarize the hull, for example. But I'll go for 6 because when I mix this with hazard emitters or emergency structural integrity or attack pattern omega, this is also increasing my damage resistance ratings, not just my energy ones, but also my kinetic ones as well. And brace for impact, for example, gives you a massive boost to your kinetic damage that you receive as well, which is basically equates to armor, which I'll come on to in a moment. But we'll move on to armor now. Armor point is basically your resistance to physical damage, kinetic damage, so mines, torpedoes, for example. And if you've been in the STFs where you still get hit by the invisible torpedoes, which are still out there, then you're going to value armor a lot. What you might find is at least my escorts tend to run a pretty decent hull plating and armor reinforcements skill level because they're going to take punishes. A lot of the time my escorts will be doing hit and run, and it won't be uncommon for a shield quarter or two to be taken out, and I'm going to take some damage and keep rounds. But I'll still keep going thanks to the resistances I've got. But in a cruiser, if you're there to soak up the damage, you're going to want a decent number in there. So 6 is really ideal, I think, in my opinion. But some people might go for the full 9 and really tank it up. But I find that means I have to sacrifice power in other skills in other areas. So that's what I picked for me. Auxiliary performance is basically a fat bonus to auxiliary. Now, I believe auxiliary power is your friend, and as such, I've got 6 points in here. Tactical officers, you might only run 3, and I do in some of my builds because I've put points slightly somewhere else. That's my personal choice. I know a lot of STO forums, I've seen a lot of people actually in their skills, TAC captains have actually put higher in auxiliary. I didn't, I put it somewhere else, but again, that's my personal choice. But you do whatever's really best for your build, really. If you're not a big fan of it, just stick 3 in there. You're still going to get a decent bonus out of that. You're still getting a 54 there, so it's a plus 18 to the bonus level. Now, weapons performance, again, I like to have as much power. Could actually use this a little bit redundant. I could probably reduce this a little bit because I'm running at a high power level anyway. But some of the other ships I fly with engineering team, I actually have the weapon power set lower, and as such, I still want a bonus to those power levels. So I went for the full 6 points in there. So that's the engineering department. We'll move on to the science and operations systems. Excuse me. And in here, I've got the full 6 points in the lieutenant side on the Starship shield emitters. So basically, this improves the healing ability of your shield. So it's quite important, this one. Basically, science team, extend shields, rotate shield frequency, transfer shield strength, for example. Very good if you're a science toon, and definitely good still if you're an engineer as well. You will be using these abilities. Then you're going to want the 6 points in here, to be perfectly honest. If anything, you're definitely going to want the 6 in there, I think, at least in my opinion. I tend not to use extend shields, actually, funny enough, but science team comes in and out occasionally, but transfer shield strength I use a lot, not just on myself, but also on teammates. In fact, you also get the resistance on your shields if you use transfer shield strength as well, so sometimes I'll favour transfer shield strength more than I will actually favour my emergency power shield 3 option. Right, into Lieutenant Commander, we'll just keep on the shield area. The Starship shield system is basically the more hit points you have in your shields. I've got the 6 in here. If you were tanking even a lot more than what I do, as in seriously tanking, then you're probably going to want to throw the full 9 in here and just scrape every bit of bonus you can to your hit points. Again, different shields will give you bonuses to that, and you've got the field generator that also gives you a bonus to that as well. And for those that have forgotten, I'll bring it up briefly. The old field generator, and I've got a bog standard one. Those that remember back in the day would remember it was a plus 35, I think it was, if memory serves me correctly. And it got, how can I put it, recalculated, nerfed, in other words, and it's now plus 17.5 for the standard Mark 11 blue. There are other ones out there, and you can get purples, etc., but good luck getting them on the exchange. I think the last time I looked, there were 35, well, not 35 million, but it was more than that. It was way, way out there in the distant future, although I have been trying to craft one, but because the crafting is random, I've not actually got one yet, but I'll still keep trying. You never know, I might get lucky. But yeah, if you want a bonus out of your shields, throw a field congenerator in there. That will give you a plus 17.5 maximum shield capacity. And in my current build and with the reputation system, my shield's now currently running hit points in my shield's now 11,927, which is nothing to sneeze at, to be perfectly honest with you. Anywho, back to the skill tree set. Let's get back down there. So yeah, more points you've got in there, the more hit points you've got in your shields, basically. And let's face it, you don't want to stick 3 in there. You want to really stick 6 in there at least. And if you're really tanking, or if you're just an escort that's really in the thick of it, then perhaps you want to put the full 9 in there. So bear that in mind. Alright. Now, power insulators. Oh, wonderful thing. This basically grants you resistance to attacks that drain your shield strength or any other power system. So basically, this is resistance to energy drains. And as such, especially if you're a tank and you're going to hit power drains at some point. Now, I have noticed in a lot that said last couple of patches, NPCs seem to be really draining your subsystems these days. I originally had 3 points, I think, in this, or 6, I can't quite remember, but either way, just before I rebuilt this team for this video, I've got the full 6 in here, and even then I'm finding that my systems are being drained a lot still. It seems to be that subsystem targeting seems to have gotten a bit of a buff somewhere along the line, but if you're up against a science toon, and one of my science toons is the full 9 points in flow capacitors, then you're going to want to have as much resistance to that power drain as well. So more points wisely spent in there, the better. Now, I've omitted to do anything in the commander skill tree. My Science Odyssey, when I was running 2 torps forward in that particular build, actually used a a Chronoton torpedo forward and a Quantum. And even if you're using tractor beams a lot, you may actually want to put some skill points in here. I actually managed to build a build that actually had 6 in here, which was, and with the Borg set initially, when I had running 3-part Borg and Mako shields, I was getting some pretty decent Graviton spec. But since I've gone over to Mako completely, I've dropped, excuse me, tractor beam and completely, and so I've not got anything in Graviton generators. But again, you could stick 3 in there and stick a console in somewhere and get a bonus there to your tractor beams, for example. So if you want to hold a target with a tractor beam and reduce that defense value, the more points you've got in there, the more effective your tractor beam is going to be. Okay, the last area that I spent in Science and Operations Systems at Captain level is the inertial dampeners, and this is basically a resistance to holds and disables, knock and slow effect. So basically, tractor beams are going to be holding you less. You'll be slowed less. Now, as I said, in the last couple of patches, I've noticed tractor beam and polarized to hull is not providing really any type of immunity, whereas it used to. Now, either it was broken before and it's now been fixed, or it was fixed and now it's broken. I don't know for definite, but polarized to hull is not doing what it used to be. The only way I seem to be breaking tractor beams really is by using either evasive maneuvers or attack pattern omega is a bona fide way of getting you out of a tractor beam, which is a bit weird because polarized to hull used to get you out of it, and it does state that you do get a resistance to tractor beam. Well, in fact, you get immunity to tractor beams for 15 seconds. Even when I activate this proactively, so I activate it before I've been hit by a tractor beam and an STF, I'm still getting held, which is a bit odd. So I don't know if the NPCs are calculating their hold effects differently. I don't know if it's a bug or not, but it may be working now properly and it may not have been before. I don't know. It's an answer for Cryptic, really, to answer that one. But again, as an escort or even as a cruiser, you're still going to want decent points in both of these, and I've got the full 6 in dampeners and in insulators. And lastly, into the ground skill tree. And my toon's more spec for space than he is for ground, but he can still hold his own pretty well. I've got the 3 points in demolitions, mainly for the fact that I use orbital strike on and off quite regularly, so I've got 3 points in there, which gives me the 54. Weapon proficiency, I want him to be good on the ground. I don't want him to be not much of a contribution, especially on ground STF, so he's got the full 6 points in weapon proficiency. So he's going to be doing some decent damage on the ground. Not as much as attack officer, but at least he can hold his own. My character relies more on generators, so I sacrifice my personal shield generator. So basically, it's the more hit points in my personal shields. I sacrifice because I use generators a lot to improve my shields, and I've got my other abilities like transferring power to my shields. So in the end, I only went for 3 in here, and I've got plenty of buffs that help get my shield up. And I use the Mako set, which gives me, you get an extra ability in there to put your shields up. In fact, if I can remember what it is, I am momentary senile. It will be. Where's it gone? No, if I hit the right thing, actually. There we go. The emergency shield capacitor, and that gets me out of trouble. It comes back up pretty well. It's also affected by repairs, so the more skills you've got in repairs, the quicker that's going to come up a lot quicker. And for whatever reason, I don't seem to have any shields slotted. I do now. Right, anyway, back to skills. Sorry about that. Also repairs. Now, if you want Engineering Team 3 as a trainable ability, you're going to want 6 points in there, and to be honest, it'd be silly not to. Basically what it is, it's giving me the buffs to shield recharge, reroute power shields, which was the ability I was trying to remember a moment ago to bring my shields back up. It also affects quick fix and engineering proficiency. So basically the 6 points in here is a no-brainer. Stick the 6 in there. Why Engineering Team 3 is under repairs, I don't know, because it's a space ability, but they lumped it with ground. It's been like that since STO launched them. In the commander set, I don't use threat control in the ground, but I do use generators at commander level, and I've got the full 6 points in here because I do use them. I do use shield generators, I do use a medical generator, I do occasionally, I do use the force field dome. I don't use the cover shield as much. That can be a bit of a pain in the proverbial, but it's still useful to have there occasionally, especially if you've got, I don't know, an elite tactical in front of you and you want to put up a barrier briefly just to bring your shields regen back up, then obviously it can have its benefits. So 6 points in this particular build. Turrets and drones I also do use a lot actually to supplement my firepower and to also give me a breather as well when I'm getting a bit swamped, which does happen from time to time. Basically this is the improvement into like phaser turrets, quantum mortars, which I do use these two a lot, the support drone and the seeker drone, which I use a lot as well. When you get up to rank 3, so if you put 3 points in it, you can train phaser turret fabrication 3, and if you get up to 6 points, you can do support drone 1 for your boss as well. I tend not to worry about that, I'll just pop it when I need it. Willpower, one of those ones I wish I could afforded to put 6 in here, but basically this grants you resistance to grad effects, so this basically increases resistance to hold, stuns, etc. I've got 53 in here, which was pretty okay. I still get knocked back a bit now and again. TAC officers, for example, I think my TACs have got 6 in here off the top of my head, because I want them to be interrupted as little as possible, but 3's been good enough for me. At Admiral level, I don't use Modification Specialist. I'm not one to use Fuse Armor, Weapons Malfunction much. I tend to let my bridge officers do that when I'm in PvE. This was a sacrifice. I decided not to spend anything in this so that I could spend a little bit more in the space area in here. And again, some people might want to say, I don't know, drop 3 in auxiliary if you attack and put that 3 in combat armor to increase that. So that's your choice really, it's whatever works for you, but because I can compensate with generators and with a couple of abilities, such as, what's the word I'm looking for, reroute power shields and shield recharge, I tend not to worry quite as much. So that's pretty much it for my engineering team for the Operations Odyssey. That's how he's spec'd out basically in a nutshell. It may not be the best build, I'm sure there are other ones out there, and there's like the Dragon build, etc. But this is what works for me, and I hold my own pretty well. I think I might do one last video actually, and I'll show the ship in action, maybe in a patrol or in an STF, just to show you how she handles, just so you can get an appreciation of how things are working and what buffs I'm using, etc. But it works for me pretty well. I know a lot of people slate the cruisers. They don't do as much damage, for example, but these ships are damage over time. If you really want to do heavy spike damage, go fly an escort at the end of the day. These guys are there really to get aggro and to take some of the fight away from the escort so that they can actually do the spike damage to take out targets. You're a support ship. Star Trek always projects this image of cruisers being the thing. They're the flagships. They do serious damage. But in this game, they're not. Well, they are, but they're not at the same time. They're there to support. I mean, the Odyssey Class ships are flagships. They're there to operate within a squadron, within a fleet. They work in conjunction with other ships. So, in more sense, it's kind of like the old wet navy style tactics. You've got the ships of the line that stand slightly back, and the other opposing side has their ships of the line, their dreadnoughts, battleships, whatever you want to call them. They'll fight from a distance, they'll pummel each other, and then you've got the smaller ships in the middle that interweave and come in and out, like destroyers, gunboats, etc. They'll be the ones that do a lot of the damage. I tend to play cruisers in that way. My cruisers may hang back a bit. I mean, that won't be saying they're not going to be in the middle of a fight, but they may be operating at 10 or 8 kilometers out, circling a target. This ship will be flying around them. It'll be hitting them with fire at will. It'll be using high-yield torpedoes. As I said, I've got the aft launcher has actually got the 180-degree quantum torpedo launcher, which is actually pretty damn good. It does a little bit less damage than most quantums, the forward one. So, say for example, my other one. So that's 4639, and my aft one's giving me 4245. So it's not quite as powerful, but it's still effective, especially with high yield, or even with torpedo salvo. So it means that I can continue to do broadsides. I can throw the ship around. I can rotate the target. I'm firing my weapons. I can sustain the fire from 5 beam arrays without any problem whatsoever. I've got Nadion inversion. I've got EPS transfer. My Regent class, the updated assault cruiser, which now has the you can slot different tacticals and you can actually increase it, so it's very similar to the Excel. That'll run, for example, with beam overload because I run dem on it. I've got the systems engineer that provides the 8 seconds of weapon drain resistance. So mix that with Nadion inversion, I can broadside with high yield. I can hit the weapons battery. So I can hold those higher power levels. I'm taking down the shields. I mean, if you're a support ship, you might, such as for example my Science Odyssey, for example, I'd run that purely as a support ship. It really was a supporter. She would use target shield subsystem and Tetrion arrays. I mean, you might want to run one with the Mega Space set, for example, for the Tetrion, not the Tetrion glider, but the bonus you get to the 2-part set. You get a bonus to draining shields additionally as well. So the cruisers are effective. They're just not as instantaneous as a lot of people want, and it's a real shame because cruisers get escalating, and unnecessarily so. Cruisers are good ships. You just have to know where their charms are, where they are really effective. If I want to do heavy damage, I just want to go in there and pummel something, I'll go take an escort. I'll go grab my tactical cap and fly them. But there's so much challenge to be had flying a cruiser, which is unfortunately, it seems on the forum, a lot of people don't wish to, which is a shame. Especially so since you have the Excelsior, which has unfairly set a benchmark for cruisers. People expect the cruisers to turn really, really quickly. The Excelsior has a higher turn rate. As such, it can use single cannons and mix that with the you're basically keeping a higher power setting to your weapons. You're doing more damage. I mean, I very rarely fly Excelsior because I don't find any challenge within that ship. For me personally, I'm not knocking anyone's Excelsior build. There are some wonderful builds out there. That ship just seems too easy for me. And as such, I appreciate flying assault cruisers, the assault cruiser refit now, the Regent, and any of the Odysseys. As I said, I'm flying the Operations one now, currently on my engineering team. They are a challenge, but the fun is there to be had, believe it or not. I realise it's hard for some people to appreciate. I think a lot of people just run out of patience. They expect it, unfortunately, because of the TV shows, to be that instantaneous damage and hit. It doesn't quite work that way. But these are damage over time ships. These ones are actually stand the test of time. I mean, I remember flying a Galaxy before I got my assault cruiser, and that ship could surprisingly hold its own. For an 80-year-old Starship within game, it would hold its own really well. If anyone who watches Alchemist's YouTube channel and watches his Rise of the Red Shirt, and there's a tip of the hat to him because it's some of his videos that have encouraged me to do this particular video. It was a particular set. I'm a big fan of his Rise of the Red Shirts. He's using the Galaxy, and believe you me, that Galaxy holds its own really well. Cruisers can do really well, and he flies that Galaxy with, I believe, yes, he's a tactical officer. So cruisers can do damage. They can do it, but don't expect them to be equal with escorts. They're not going to be if you want that heavy spike. But sorry, I go off on the rant there, and I apologise. But that's my sort of third and final guide or tutorial, if you like, for my particular build for the Operations Odyssey. That's how my engineers built. That's how I play them. I may actually do one last video capture with the Operations Odyssey in combat, just so you can get an appreciation of what goes on. Don't get me wrong, it's not going to be fast combat, it's going to be a much slower pace, but you'll be surprised at what this ship can do, and you can be surprised what cruisers do in general. But yeah, hope that's a good guide for you, and I apologise for ranting there. Yeah, hope you enjoyed the series. I'd obviously like some feedback into knowing what video to set to do next. I am contemplating going over to the KDF side to do a tutorial on my KDF tactical officer with her Samra fleet reship. The fleet refit Samra, if I get the right words out. That may be the next focus of my next video series. I'm not sure yet. So yeah, thank you for tuning in, and look forward to seeing and speaking to you all again later. Goodbye.